We are live, Sipple.
How about that?
How about that? Welcome in. It's Husker Extra live. I'm Parker. There's Steve. It's your Lincoln Journal-Star crew. Husker Extra live, presented by Tom Dinsdale Automotive of Grand Island and Hastings, of course. We appreciate the support there. Sipple, we will give people a couple of minutes to roll in here, and we'll obviously take any questions that people have in the comments section. We'll talk Nebraska football. We can talk hoops if people have hoops questions. Obviously, a couple of key signings and then a big decision coming tomorrow from a five-star kid, Bryce McGowan's, and then an interesting football game on deck for Saturday at 11 a.m. First football game of the season at Memorial Stadium, Nebraska and Penn State. So let's just start it as people join us here and jump in the comments. Jeff says, "What's up, guys? Go Big Red." Just what do you think? I mean, where does your mind go when you think about Nebraska and Penn State this weekend?
Well, first my mind goes to what else did I read your story about what Frost said about the quarterbacks. What else? What was the other news out of today from Frost? Go ahead.
Yeah. Beyond the quarterbacks, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot in terms of a lot of news. He reiterated what he thought of Matt Farniok playing center, which is he had high praise for Matt and the job he did. But he said, we're a lot better when both of those guys are on the field, Matt Farniok and Cam Jurgens, who he was filling in for. So didn't say for sure whether Jurgens would be back this week. Obviously didn't play against Northwestern. And then he said, they're going to try to continue to get some of those young skill position guys going. Marvin Scott was the number 2 running back. It sounds like Ronald Tompkins will be back in the mix this week after not making the trip to Northwestern. So you've got competition for carries. He was complimentary of Sevion Morrison, who we haven't seen yet. Said he's been coming back from a minor injury. So really, there'll just be a lot of competition for reps, I think, both at receiver. I think we'll continue to see some of the young guys, and then in the backfield behind Dedrick Mills.
Okay. All right. That's good. And so you're not – bottom line, we're not expecting Jurgens to play.
I'd be a little surprised, I guess, at this point, but, Frost didn't rule it out.
Okay. Any questions about Omar Manning?
Yeah. There was a question about how he looked in practice this week. Frost talked, generally speaking, about the young guys and the progress that they're trying to make on that front. So nothing specific about Omar. Just don't, not quite sure. Obviously, he did not come close to the 20 to 25 snap plan that we thought maybe they'd have for him against Northwestern. I don't know that he's been entirely healthy, but there's also competition for reps too, right? I mean Marcus Fleming looked pretty good. Alante Brown played 21 snaps or in that range somewhere against Northwestern. So you don't just the idea, and I think Nebraska fans should hope that Omar Manning can't just waltz onto the field and play the entire game, right? I mean, you want competition for snaps, and it certainly seems like he's going to have that.
Yeah, it shouldn't work that way. Now, one reason I keep asking about Omar Manning, Parker, is because I think Omar Manning affects Wan'Dale Robinson.
Right.
Let's put it this way. You tell me if I'm wrong, Parker. If Omar Manning was what we thought, and he came in here ready to play, and he he had 6 catches or 7 catches by now. I think that, and he's an outside receiver, outside receiving threat. I think that takes pressure off Wan'Dale.
Yeah,
you might see a different Wan'Dale. Those two are, I wouldn't call them inextricably linked, but the reason I'm interested in Omar is because I do think it would take pressure off the best player on the offense, in my opinion, is Wan'Dale.
Yeah. I just wonder at this point if when you're talking about outside receivers, if you're closer to having that pressure release being Marcus Fleming or even Xavier Betts than it is Omar Manning at this point. I mean, the snaps don't lie, right? Both of those guys played more than Omar Manning against Northwestern. That doesn't mean that Manning can't keep making up ground, but Marcus Fleming played probably close to half the snaps against Northwestern and had 5 catches for 75 yards. I mean, he and Xavier Betts were on the field in that final drive as Nebraska was trying to go down and tie the game. So, I'm not saying give up on Omar Manning or anything like that, but seems like other guys are closer at this point to being impact players.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. What do you got for questions there, P?
David Coder says, "What's up, fellas?"
Hi, David.
Omar targets. We just covered that. Rodrigo, what's up? Hoping for a better performance this week from Valdivia, Chile. Rodrigo is always on with us, which is awesome.
Thank you, Rodrigo.
Who does Sipple think will start at quarterback? Well, Jack, I will ask Sipple that since he's right here, but I would also advise you to head over to HuskerExtra.com and read Sipple's latest column because it gets to that point.
Well, yeah, me and Parker talk about it. We don't know. I mean, Frost did not say today.
Did not.
I just think it'll be McCaffrey. I think it's sort of a common sense discussion. I thought I'm answering the question and using Parker's knowledge to do it. I thought you made a good point on radio this week when you said, the way they opened the season, it felt like the tie went to Adrian. And They were close. It was close. Frost I went back and was reading what Frost said going into the season. And he said it was even. And that, in fact, if McCaffrey had experience, it might be McCaffrey as the game 1 starter. Now, I think after 2 games and after Adrian goes 12 for 27 passing, he looks a little rough mechanically. He airmails some balls. I think the tie goes to McCaffrey. And also, I think that the big picture macro discussion figures into it. It's hard to say how prominently. Maybe it doesn't at all. I think it should figure into it. The program needs a spark right now.
Yeah,
it's lost 7 of 8. You don't have to panic on the season. I think panic would be starting a quarterback who was well behind Adrian. It's been characterized as a dead even race, so it's not a panic move. I think when Frost said he was looking for a spark against Northwestern in the 4th quarter, you could just carry that over to he's looking for a spark this season. Yeah. And I think it's a good idea to go to the kid from Colorado.
I would guess that we'll see McCaffrey, and I would think he'll start. I mean, that's just a guess at this point. Frost didn't say today. If he doesn't, I think you'll see him prominently involved in the game plan, but I'd be a little surprised, I guess, at this point if he didn't start. Jonathan says GBR from Illinois. What's up, Jonathan? David, awesome question from PG on the sunglasses. Well, yeah.
That was funny.
I've picked up a little more intel on that. It sounds like perhaps Scott's characterization of him borrowing sunglasses might have been stretching the term borrow. Sounds like he may have plucked them off of someone's head just before the game.
Is that right? So he was having trouble seeing out there.
Yeah, against Northwestern. I guess before the game they were on the field and it was like super bright. And he couldn't see across the field basically. So he decided he needed some sunglasses even though he doesn't like sunglasses. So that was funny. I got in a way, I guess that was just a lighthearted thing. Figured out a shot and he laughed, which was, you need that every once in a while.
That's for sure.
I'd like to see Luke at quarterback and Martinez at wide receiver, Jeff says. Yeah, Jeff, that's an interesting idea. One of the things that I'm curious to see, like and we talked a little bit about this on the podcast yesterday. So you can check HuskerExtra.com. We probably talk quarterbacks for, half or more of that. So in-depth discussion there, probably deeper than we'll get here and now. But the one thing, Sipple, that we talked about yesterday was that if let's say that Luke McCaffrey starts, just as sort of a hypothetical, it doesn't mean that you couldn't bring Martinez in and run all of the two quarterback stuff that you saw against Ohio State. And whether that would mean Martinez lining up as the quarterback and McCaffrey as a running back like we saw against Ohio State, or inversing those roles, that's why I think Adrian Martinez is going to be a big part of this offense the rest of the year still. Maybe not getting the ball snapped to him every play, but, whether it's lining up as a running back or whether it's him coming in to play quarterback occasionally to use Luke McCaffrey in different ways. Like, I still think that all of that stuff, there's no reason for that stuff to not be on the table.
Parker, Frost, remember Frost, what he said? It really struck a chord with me when Frost said before the season that Adrian and Luke are two of the better players on the team.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need to know too much more than that when you're trying to assess whether Martinez is going to play or not.
Right.
They want him on the field. And by the way, he's far and away their leading rusher right now. I mean,
he's averaging 7.2 yards per carry.
Right. And he does look good running the ball, right? I mean, he looks better running the ball this year. So absolutely. He'll have a role. I think that Adrian's really important going forward, be it as a kind of a wild card player. I didn't say wildcat. I just call it a wild card player, or the guy that is the number 2 quarterback, which as much as they're running the quarterback right now, to have a number 2 like that is really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just, not to pump it up too much, but Sipple, I thought, wrote a really insightful column about why Adrian Martinez will be important going forward, regardless of his role. So HuskerExtra.com. Mark, what's up? Jonathan asked, do we know if Will Honus is playing? I'm not overly concerned because Reimer was awesome. Yeah, Jonathan, impressive debut. Anyone you talk to pretty much not surprised by what we saw from Luke Reimer. He's explosive, obviously. Early on, he missed a couple things, and Barrett Ruud was pretty open about that this week on Tuesday. But, it looks like they got something with Luke Reimer, put it that way. And we'll see how consistently he can do it, and just like with Will Honus or any player, particularly at linebacker, health is really going to be important. Luke Reimer missed a little bit of time with an injury last year, dealt with injuries in high school, missed some time in camp this year. So, if you can keep him healthy, you can keep him on the field, man. He's an impact player for sure.
Yeah, and you wrote about him, and it was an excellent story. He's an interesting case. I mean, this is a walk-on.
Yeah.
And like the Chris Slatt, his trainer, was quoted in your story saying if he was 6'3" and 245, he probably would have been a scholarship player. But he was in high school, he was 6'1", 195. But as Chris Slatt pointed out in your story, he's long-legged, he's long-armed, long-limbed, big quads, big hamstrings. So he has some length to him, which helps. And Parker, like you don't have to be Bill Parcells to see he does move at a different speed.
Yeah.
And you pointed it out. In fact, when we were watching a little video, how quickly he gets to the ball versus some players. And that explosion in small spaces is not entirely what football is all about, but it's largely what football is all about. If that explosion in a very tight window is really important, and he has that, and he's fast and a big space too.
It's always refreshing when a guy completely lives up to like what you hear about him and does it immediately. Like, you can't always expect that that's going to happen. But like back in April, at the beginning, like basically at the beginning of the pandemic, a couple weeks after spring ball got shut down, I was talking to Luke Gifford because he was in limbo about the Cowboys didn't know when, players were going to be back. And obviously he was coming off a promising first season and all that. And I was talking to him about that and about Chris Slatt. And I just asked Gifford, I was like, hey, have you worked out with Luke Reimer? And he said, it's in a story somewhere that I wrote. He said something along the lines of like, yeah, he's a freak. Like, he's an incredible athlete and he's going to be a stud. Just like very flatly, like just met, like there was no doubt about it. Like that, watch, he'll be really good. And so, there's obviously, it can always get better. And he wasn't perfect in his first career start, but certainly, I mean, he's going to be a big part of that defense, for a long time.
Yes.
Do you think they practice their tackling skills? Tracy said, yeah, it's funny because we've heard, Sipple, that overall the coaches like where the tackling is at more than the past couple of years. But you did hear Frost. I'll tee you up for this one. You heard Frost on Monday say that they had a couple guys in the second half try to get on ESPN rather than just getting a guy to the ground, and that stuff needs to stop.
Yeah, I know where you're going with that. I mean, I know I come off as this kind of old man, old school guy that liked 70s football, but there's a lot of guys in the NFL that do it too, Parker, that lead with their shoulder and launch. And that seems to be kind of like a popular move. But you saw what can happen when you do that. Riley Leaf spun out of something like that and got in the end zone the other day. Another guy broke a tackle. It can be effective. I mean, if you go for the big hit, sometimes it works out. But, man.
Sure. Deontay Williams forced a fumble against Chris Olave.
Yeah, that's true.
That against Ohio State, yeah.
Yeah. By and large, though, most coaches will tell you it makes most sense to use your arms and wrap up, and you can still hit hard doing that.
One thing, just since we're talking about it, that Chris Slatt told me when I was reporting that Luke Reimer story this week that didn't actually make it into the story is he said one of the things that's really unique about Reimer is how low he plays. And he said he plays low and he hits up through the strike point. From say the waist up through the chest. And he said, too many guys play high and then they're out of position and they miss or they're up around the head and they lose leverage that way. But he said you won't see that happen to Luke much because he plays so low to the ground. So anyways.
Parker, he's like a ground missile.
He's like a ground missile, yes.
Yeah. Is there such thing as a ground missile? I think
all missiles probably are in the air at some point.
Well, it's a low ground. It's a low missile. Low
missile. I got it. Low and slow.
No, low and fast.
Oh, low and fast. Okay, got it. Did the coaches mention anything they did to eliminate the false start penalties? Yeah, good question, David. I mean,
what do you do? It's an age-old question. Parker, I've been dealing with that question for 30 years. I mean, what do you do?
It's part of the game, right? To some degree, no team is perfect in that regard. It's going to happen, but it's obviously happened way too frequently with Nebraska so far this year. Ethan Piper, young guy, mentioned on Monday or Tuesday, and Frost mentioned this too, that Northwestern was mimicking calls quite a bit, or they were yelling shift, that sort of thing, and that seemed to bother Nebraska a little bit. I mean, that's just something that you got to deal with, obviously. That can be called a penalty if it's too close to what your cadence is. And it comes with one of the best penalty calls in college football, which is disconcerting signals. But
that's awesome.
You can't expect to get that call, right? I mean, you got to just not flinch. Especially when you're a senior and you've played a lot of football. So anyways, we'll see. That stuff's got to get better, obviously, because Nebraska doesn't take much. They get off track on offense and drives really go to hell in a handbasket. David asks, Sipple, when coaches say it's open competition for all positions this week, is that just coach speak? When you've got a calendar year without a win, shouldn't every week be open competition when there's evidence of poor play?
It's a good question. I mean, at my age, when I hear that, it sounds tactical. It sounds like a motivational ploy. But I don't think I think that there's a lot of reality attached to that comment. In that we saw, for instance, in the secondary, Quentin Newsome and Miles Farmer assert themselves pretty well. So, if you're a veteran safety or a veteran corner, you got to perform in practice this week, or those guys are right there. They look ready to play. You would say that there's other positions you could say that too. Certainly, you mentioned the receivers. That's probably the one you're really watching, where they trot out starters in Wandale, and then it was Cade Warner and Levi Falk. Now those are two of those guys are seniors, Is Cade Warner Jr.
Junior.
Yeah, Levi Falk's a graduate transfer. But you might, this week in practice, if Marcus Fleming carries over into practice what he did in the game, and Alante Brown continues to make progress, and Xavier Betts continues to make progress, of course, those other guys' jobs are threatened, which is what you want. I don't know that. I could, you can. I get it. I know why people ask that question. Isn't it always open competition? I think to a certain extent it is. But when you're getting ready for a team, you want your ones together a lot. So you're not shifting guys in and out and trying to judge them a lot of the time. But I do think at certain positions that was probably going on.
I think as much as that comment and what Eric Chenander said on Tuesday, as much as that people interpret that from like a player-centric perspective, I feel like that almost was more about the sentiment among the coaching staff. You name starters before the season. A guy wins a job for a reason. And if you're a coach, if you're a position coach, and you change your starter 2 weeks into the season, like one of the natural questions is like, well, did you just get it wrong? And right. I think that it almost is like a reminder to the coaching staff of like, hey, we've got some guys that we think are up and comers, and it's not enough to just say, well, the veteran guy is still ahead by the ever so slight of a margin, so just continue on doing it that way. I think Eric Chenander, to me, it almost sounded like he was talking to not necessarily like to himself, but that was more of his approach. It's like an open mind to who else can get on the field and help us, rather than just saying, we've got our two deep sets, we're going to keep rolling with that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Jack.
Go ahead. I wanted to ask you one thing. What other position besides DBs, receivers, would you say that competition's a little open? Is there any
running back? I would think running back. Aside from quarterback being the obvious one, I think at running back, that Dedrick Mills. I'm not saying Dedrick Mills is going to lose his job as a starter necessarily, but Frost is pretty complimentary of Marvin Scott. It was unspectacular, 3 carries for 14 yards. But when I went back and watched the game, I thought he ran hard, and he ran through contact a couple of times, and he showed actually, I thought, pretty good speed. We didn't see it, on full display or in an extensive manner, but between him and Ronald Tompkins and Savion Morrison getting healthy, I think there's going to be competition for carries there. And then, we'll see. Obviously,
it'll be hard. Yeah, it'll be hard to for any of those kids to get past Dedrick.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Marvin Scott, he ran hard, but Dedrick is, you don't worry about him cutting loose. That's the kind of – he runs the ball the way a Division I running back should run. He runs with abandon. He goes into contact hard. Those young kids, I hope, learn from him the way he goes into contact. He explodes into guys, and he does so willingly. I hope he can get a little more room to run. But man, I'll tell you one thing: you never worry about Dedrick Mills is running hard ever in any situation. He runs hard every time he gets the ball. And one way to solve that red zone issue, when they get close to the goal line, you just get it to him. He finds a way to get in.
Goes for the end zone.
Yeah, he'll fight like it's his last meal waiting for him. I just love the way he runs the ball.
There you go. Couldn't have said it better myself. But yeah, there's several, front seven too, although they're just already rolling a bunch of young guys through on the front seven. So, you could maybe tinker with the reps a little bit, but like Luke Reimer's obviously going to play a lot. Nick Henrich has had a big and growing role at outside linebacker, but they're mixing and matching a lot of guys at outside linebacker and on the defensive line, and they're giving a lot of looks. I think it's a pretty interesting way that they're playing up front, odd front, even front. They're playing 3-4, 4-3, 5-2, 2-5. They started in 2-5 yesterday or on Saturday against Northwestern, which was kind of cool. So I think they'll keep using that that kind of stuff. Okay, 2 quarterback questions. Sipple. Jack asks, do you think there's hesitation to go with McCaffrey due to concerns with Martinez transferring? And has Mario said anything that might shed light on exactly what's plaguing Adrian? Well, to Ryan's question, the second one, we haven't talked to Mario in a couple of weeks. It's obviously a little different this year with Zoom. We don't have all of the assistant coaches at our disposal every week. And so I think either before the opener or just before the opener was the last time we had Verduzco on a Zoom call. So hopefully we'll get a chance to chat with him again soon. But what do you think, Sipple, on the transfer point? Do you buy that at all?
Well, it's always on your mind. I mean, I don't think you make decisions based on that, though. I wouldn't. Adrian likes it here a lot. I mean, he is a captain. He's well respected. I mean, I was always struck. I'll always be struck by the way McCaffrey spoke of Adrian in such reverential terms, that Adrian took him under his wing and will do whatever he can to help him. In Parker, you've been around athletics. It's not always that way. It's not always that way in life. I mean, I think Adrian truly, truly loves it here. And I think, he speaks all the time about how he wants this program to get back to where it was. He wants to help doing it. I guess what I'm telling you is I'd be a little surprised at this point if he jumped into the portal. I would be. I think his role is such that I think he'll have a prominent role this season. Maybe after the season, he would have entertained that conversation. But man, I bet he's not thinking. Parker, I'd be surprised if he's thinking about that at all right now.
No, yeah, I don't. Right, especially because it's a pretty simple process. I mean, if you make that decision, you say you want to be in the portal, you're in there within 48 hours, and away you go. You can talk to coaches right away. So, given the fact that he's clearly going to have a role here, this season, and then on top of that, I mean, there's a lot of scholarship questions coming up beyond this season. About eligibility and about how many scholarships are going to be out there to be available and all of that. And so I think that that's something like, could it happen? Sure. And could it happen after the season? Sure. But I'd be surprised if it's on his mind now. And obviously I don't know that, but I'd be a little surprised. And also I think it's going to take a couple months after the season ends to sort of figure out what the college football landscape is going to look like for the next year or so. So I can be sort of naive and sort of a Pollyanna. But I just would like, let's put it this way, Parker. I would like to think he's not thinking about it. His role is big. He's got a big role. I mean, he's got a critical role on the 2020 Nebraska football team. And I'd be disappointed, frankly, if he's sitting around thinking about which team might work best for him next. I'd be surprised if that's the case. Anthony has a good question. Do you think the offense is schemed too much around what our opponents do instead of being schemed around our players? And
that's a good offense look like? It's a really good question. It's a philosophical question, but I hear from former players, Parker, that the old school Nebraska guys. Now listen, just remember, I'm 54.
Yeah, you're an old. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm an old. And the old school Nebraska guys came from an era where they imposed their will. Okay. And I'm not even talking always about the championship teams at Nebraska. I'm talking about the 70s teams that didn't necessarily win a national title, or the 80s and 90s teams that came up short or were just 9-3. Nebraska, for a long time, imposed its will on people. They didn't take what the defense gave them necessarily. There's always a little bit of that conversation, right? That's part of athletics. But no, it was. I wonder about that sometimes. If Frost can get to a point where it's not, he doesn't feel like he has to be real creative. You just do what you do, and if you do it well enough, it's going to be effective.
Yeah, I think, it can devolve into semantics, obviously, right? Because even an attacking offense, you're going to attack based on what the defense is doing to you. I mean, if you're bracket covering a team's best receiver, you are not going to just hoist the ball into double coverage because that's what you do. But you're going to take advantage of what you're going to have to take. You want to take advantage and attack based on how the defense is trying to take away your options, right? And I don't know if that's. I mean, I'm not in Scott Frost's mind. I don't know if he doesn't think that they have the talent offensively to do that at this point to really dictate. I mean, this is what I would say. I would say that in 2017 at Central Florida, they had stuff that they could run against anybody in that conference, and they did. And if you turned them on, you would know what it was going to look like. They were going to be playing a million miles an hour. Mackenzie Milton was going to be stressing all corners of the field. They use the perimeter a lot. They use those fast backs a lot. And I don't think, no team in the Big Ten except for Ohio State has a sort of overwhelming talent advantage that just allows them to do exactly what they want every time. The next closest thing might be, Wisconsin doesn't go into a game and say, the defense is playing us different. We're not going to run pin and pull power this week.
They do it
all the time.
That's a good example, Parker. That's a really good example. Oftentimes it's in the run game. Oftentimes we're talking about the run game, right?
Yeah. So I don't know, Anthony. I think about that quite a bit. But the thing is, you need both, right? You need the scheme, and you need good, solid, fundamentally sound offensive ideas and creativity, and then you need guys that can go out and do it and execute the job they're supposed to execute. That was Jonathan. Yeah, it was Chenander that said guys were trying to get on ESPN. That was a good line. Jackass, I know that there will be a 3-man rotation at inside linebacker once Honus is healthy again, but could Reimer start over Honus and maybe take the majority of his snaps?
Oh yeah, he could, but it's not. Hey, listen, Honus played well in the first. He played. Yep. I'd say he played pretty well in the first game. Honus is not. There's not a big drop off, I don't think. Honus and Miller are playing pretty well. So I think they feel really good about what's going on with the inside linebackers right now. I just kind of look at it like all three of those guys are going to play. How the snaps are divvied up, it's hard to tell.
Yeah. Let's see. What's wrong with Adrian's throwing motion? He used to throw a good ball. Yeah, Travis. Like I said, we haven't talked to Mario in a while. Sometimes he's really open about that stuff. Sometimes not. Understandably so. I'm not an expert, but something looks a little bit amiss. I have to agree with you. The ball sailed on him a bunch of times, and I don't know if it's an overstride or a misstride or what, but something with his footwork and just with the throwing motion in general doesn't look quite right. And I honestly don't know if that's a mental thing or if it's a health thing, or if he's, if you're not processing or seeing things fast enough and you try to speed yourself up physically, then your mechanics can get out of whack. So there's a lot of things that can happen there. I wouldn't profess to know enough to know, which of those things it is, but certainly, Sipple and I were talking about this the other day. There were throws that he made as a freshman in 2018 that were ridiculous. I
know. Yeah.
Feed an 18-yard out to the far hash that just missiles,
Yeah. Parker, what's the deal? What's the deal?
I don't know. I honestly don't. I don't know if it's a confidence thing. I don't know if it's that their receivers aren't as good as Stan and JD were in 2018 or some combination or what. I don't know. Take a couple more and get out of here. May have missed this earlier, Will says, but any news on Omar? Yeah, Frost didn't say much about it today. We'll just see where he falls in the pecking order on Saturday with other young guys like Marcus and Marcus Fleming and Xavier Betts. Martinez can't even make 5-yard outs and screens. Yeah, Randall, accuracy on the short stuff was for sure an issue on Saturday against Northwestern. No doubt about it. 12 of 15 against Ohio State, and then well below 50% against Northwestern. Just can't have that, obviously. Luke has quick eyes and finds the open man. Yeah, Sipple, you thought that, right? That the offense, he just seems to make decisions quickly when he's in the game.
Yeah, we saw a limited sample size. Now, you have to keep that in consideration. But yeah, he operates quickly, so it definitely looked good from that standpoint. And I think we're going to see a much larger sample size on Saturday. And
yeah. Jesse says enough quarterback talk. Is the starting punter healthy yet? Jesse, the answer to your question is no. Frost said today that Daniel Cherney is getting closer, but is not close at this point. So returning.
Okay.
Yeah, he said he's making progress and trying to get back out there, but that he's not close to being back at this point. They need better punting than it was. It was really windy on Saturday against Northwestern, but they need better than they got because they were 27.6 average net yards per punt, a couple big returns and all of that. All right, one more. I have a feeling this is a major get-right game for Penn State where they play like a top 10 team, Jack says. Thoughts?
Well, maybe it's a get-right game for Nebraska. I think we're looking at another close game. I mean, you can always almost predict that when they play anybody but Ohio State. I think we're looking at a close game. The thing I'm wondering about, Parker, is, I mean, I bet if you went down to the field before the game, which we can't, and stood along the fence and watched warm-ups, you'd say, oh, wow, look at Penn State's length and size on defense.
Yeah.
Why are they giving up 36 a game? 36.2 a game. I don't understand it completely. But what I'm getting at here is I think it'll be a hard game for the offense again, for Nebraska's offense. I don't think they're going to score 36 points on Penn State. I think if they score 27, it might be enough, though. So I think you're looking at a 27-24 game and probably pick them. I don't know. Hard to say who will win.
Yeah, with a 0-3 team in this kind of season, it's really hard to say. I mean, I think it will be a real credit to Penn State's mental toughness if they come out and look like they're completely locked in for 60 minutes. That's a big task to me, to travel all this way at 0-3. You're already totally out of it in the division, and to be ready to go. I'll be impressed with the work that James Franklin and the coaches there, the coordinators Brent Fry and Kirk Soraka. That'd be a mighty impressive accomplishment to have a team that looks like it's ready to go and locked in. I think you'll see that from Nebraska. I think there's just been I think that Nebraska will play really hard. If Penn State does, it's gonna be really tough. If they don't, I mean, look, they got blown out by Maryland last week, so it's a game that Nebraska can win. I tend to think it'll be close. Who wins? Who the heck knows? All right, let's cut it there. Thanks again to Tom Dinsdale Automotive Group in Grand Island and Hastings for sponsoring Husker Extra Live. We've got a ton of coverage on HuskerExtra.com. Brent has a really good story, Brent Wagner, on season ticket holders. A bunch of other stuff, obviously, all week so far and leading up to kickoff at 11 a.m. At Memorial Stadium on Saturday. So for Steve, I'm Parker. Thanks for watching.